You're listening to Capsule on liveinlimbo.com. My name is Sean Chin, and this is an adventure into music, film, and pop culture. It is with great and tremendous sadness to talk about the passing of Scott Weiland. He was found dead in his tour bus on Thursday, December 3, 2015, at the age of 48. Our thoughts go out to his family, friends, crew, and fans, and we were privileged enough to cover his final show in Toronto and interview him. Today on the show, we have Don Hamilton. How's it going?
Good. How are you?
I am very good. It's been a very hectic 48 hours, 24 hours now.
You're telling me it has been.
Yeah, I'm sure your phone has been blowing up as well.
Nonstop. At Facebook, my phone, Twitter, it has been nonstop.
And yeah, I can imagine. And so you mainly do concert photos and you do reviews for Live in Limbo. And you got the chance to interview Scott, and we'll play that a little later in the show. Also joining us today is the amazing Eric Alper. He's the director of media relations and label relations at eOne Music Canada. How's it going? Thanks for being here.
Oh, happy to be here. Congratulations, by the way, on getting the last interview.
Oh, well,
on a sad
it's a very sad note, yes.
Yeah, it's one of those things, though, that, you never know. And whenever people tell me, after I tell them that this person is coming into town and this person is coming into town, they'll always say, oh, yeah, I'll catch him again. And sometimes you just never know when that person is going to be the last time that you could see them.
Tell me about your history. Like you have a long musical legacy, and like you're in this industry for a long time, and for a very long time. So you kind of can mirror Scott in a way. Like he's been in the game for a very long time. So tell me your history, like about knowing his music and his personality.
Yeah, I think a lot of people that are feeling pains this week it's because we all grew. People that are of my age, I'm going to say I'm 45, but publicly I'm going to tell them I'm 23.
I'm right along with you, Eric.
Right, exactly. I mean, we all grew up with that music. I mean, I was 21 when, Nirvana, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains,
wow,
Stone Temple Pilots, and Pearl Jam came up, and those were like the holy five. If you loved rock music and you wanted to be current, that was your generation of music. That was your Lollapalooza. You helped create that scene. And Stone Temple Pilots went from 0 to 100 in a very, very short amount of time. They started off forming a band called Mighty Joe Young, and then they went to Stone Temple Pilots. And they kind of were a little bit knocked by people with the so-called authority for a time, because they played stadiums right away. They had chart successes right away. They had singles on the radio when it wasn't cool to have singles on the radio. It wasn't cool to play stadiums. It was cool to be broke and in still living in a basement apartment. The term selling out was directed at Pearl Jam and was directed at Stone Temple Pilots. But the one thing that they always had was a knack for songwriting, and they looked to the Beatles and they looked to the Rolling Stones and they looked to Black Sabbath and figured out that they could be heavy like Metallica, and they could also be melodic like Paul McCartney and John Lennon were, and that was a big part of their success. And before obviously social media came along, when we didn't know 24 hours a day what was going on with our favorite artists, we would only have to read about them in the pages of Rolling Stone or Spin Magazine or one of the very few music publications, because they weren't even online at the time. We all knew that Scott had, alcohol problems. He had drug habit that it's hard to shake. It's a really hard thing, and you don't even have to be a music fan to know. You don't even have to be a musician to know how hard it is. Drug culture and alcohol abuse run rampant in our society. He was no different. And, part of it is that, and somebody asked me this yesterday, and it was, and they weren't being facetious at all. They were just saying, well, he had it all. You work so hard and so long to try and get that brass ring of success and sales. And he had it all. And why did he just throw it away? And the thing that people don't realize, and the thing that people forget, is that when you become a success in music and you're surrounded yourself with yes men, and when you have limos, and when you have all the sex you want, and all the drugs you want, and all the free alcohol you want, and you're getting gold albums mailed like frisbees from countries that you've never even heard of, and you never have to wait anymore for a table at a restaurant, and then you go on stage and you feel the love and adoration and just happiness for an hour and a half, and then you go afterwards to a party, and or you hang out with your friends and groupies and people who still love you, and then when you go back to your hotel room at 2 o'clock in the morning by yourself, and it's lonely and there's nothing on the TV, and you're just chasing that high again, and it's completely normal. It's a normal thing to do. It's why gamers exist. They're always looking for that next high, that next fix, no matter where it is, no matter what job we have. And being a musician, unfortunately, a lot of people from day one with Billie Holiday have taken that approach. And unfortunately, it hit Scott a little bit too hard, but that's a hard 48 that he lived.
Absolutely. Don, how about you? What is your history with him? Like, when did you first fall in love with his music?
Oh, it definitely had to be in the 90s. And actually, Stone Temple Pilots song, it actually reminds me of an ex every time I hear it. That there's one specific person that I think of. And just going back to Eric's note, I think people forget that he's still a human being, and we all have faults, and whether it be drug or alcohol or smoking or whatever our vice is, we all have faults, and people forget that.
Absolutely. And so
just because he's on top of the world doesn't mean that he's not a human being just like the rest of us.
Yeah, and he's certainly not immune.
Right.
To, we're all skin and bones and blood.
Yeah.
And the sad part of it all is that, he leaves a wife, he leaves his kids. And, it's hard for people in that situation when you have those problems. They know that there are people who love them. They know that they are a business entity to the people who support them and who do PR and who do A&R and who do studio work with them, and they're responsible for their livelihood. And how deep and how bad must you be to get that deep into your vice and your addiction to not stop? Because that's really what it comes down to, is that person has to absolutely want to stop, and nothing else will do. We saw it with Amy Winehouse, with Universal threatening to not spend any more money on anything that has to do with the promotion of her music unless she stopped. She signed that agreement, and then not a short period of time later, she died of a drug overdose. But Don's right. Like we're all in the same boat. We're all on the same planet. And when you leave your family like that, that's just a crying shame.
Now, Eric, you don't need to drop names, but have you seen this in person, like with like an artist, like that you're close with?
Yeah.
And what did that feel like observing this? Like, did you try to help them?
I think, like a lot of people, you kind of get wrapped at the very beginning because you're so enthralled with the music industry, and you're seeing history being made at you. I think that we all kind of take a look at what the Rolling Stones were doing, urinating on the sides of walls and thinking, oh, they're such rebels. And then, when you see, John Lennon in the 70s have his drug problems, and then you hear the music and you think, wow, this is the most realist album by a solo Beatle member. And you get wrapped up in all of that, and you think it's cool. You see Jimi Hendrix and Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison, and you've got a very different vibe about them. But they're not here anymore, and so when I first started, it was all, the music industry was just rolling in the dough. CDs were selling huge amounts, and drugs were rampant, especially in a lot of the scene that I started off in, because the first couple of years was the first wave of EDM with the Prodigy and rave scenes. And although that, the Prodigy, I'm just mentioning in terms of like, music. I'm
Yeah.
not mentioning the fact that they were in there because I've actually never seen them do drugs. But that scene was all about, ecstasy and drugs. So yeah, I have seen it, but not so much anymore in the last, I'm going to say, decade or so, because now the music industry is so, it's so lucrative and so hard to get into that you have to be relatively healthy to be a success. Like look at people like Justin Bieber or Selena Gomez
Yeah.
and those. I mean, they're fit as a fiddle. They've got really good head on their shoulders, and even Justin kind of fell a little bit off the beaten path for a year and a half. But this is a business now, and as such, and you've got a lot of responsibility to the people who work for you. And I think a lot of people that, at least that I'm associating with, don't do any of that. And also too, it's harder to get up in the morning with a hangover than at this age than it was when you were 20. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So Don, we're going to talk about how this interview happened. So like a little backstory, and Eric, maybe you might not know this. So we usually have like a full crew go down, like video, lights, interviewer, and all that. So me and Gilles LeBlanc, rock enthusiast, we were supposed to do this interview. We had it like scheduled, but then we did not hear back from management until like 20 minutes before, and then he just texts me and he's like, okay, let's do it now. I'm like, there's no way we can get down in that short amount of time. So I'm like texting Dawn because I know she's going to be there. I'm like, please, Dawn. Okay, so you have your iPhone, use the voice memos app, face it towards him, put your camera on a tripod.
I was very lucky to have my tripod with me in the trunk of my car. You know what? You just got to make the best of a bad situation.
I email her some questions that were written by Gilles, and then she put her own twist and spins on some of them. And so some comments in the YouTube video that's up right now in the show notes, some people are like, this was unrehearsed and she's just reading off paper and it's like not professionally done. Okay, yeah, because it was like last minute. That's our explanation of how it happened. But we just wanted to just put it like unedited out. Like it was going to be initially like question cards and then you would see him answer it. But Dawn and I both agreed after we found out that he passed away to just leave her voice and leave it as unedited as possible. And so we're going to take a listen to that right now.
Okay, we're going. Okay, first of all, happy belated American Thanksgiving. What are you most thankful for?
My wife and my children.
And how old are your kids?
13 and 14.
That's awesome. I'd like to know, I've read that you hadn't felt more excited about making an album that you did with Blaster. Has the same youthful feeling held true with your new tour guitarist, Nick?
Yeah, Nick's a great player. I mean, it was just a terrible tragedy losing Jeremy. He was my main collaborator on writing Blaster. And he was just a tour de force. But Nick stepped in and has really filled those shoes.
That's great to hear. That really is. I was listening to rock radio station the other day where Blush was playing. I gotta say, your songs still stand out amidst all the music that tries to pass itself off as alternative. How would you define your music legacy?
I've always looked at us as a band, as first off, the bands I've been in as rock and roll. But I've always looked at us also as bands that change from album to album and morph into different sounds. I think to stay in one sound is a career killer.
Yeah, you know what? It actually is. I think it's pretty safe to say that you're one of the most stylish frontmen ever. If you could give some tips to up-and-comers on how to successfully balance rock attitude with fashion, what would it be?
Black suit, white shirt, skinny black tie.
That's it? That's all there is to it?
That's a good place to start.
If Scott Weiland was alone in a zombie apocalypse or ever stranded on a desert island, which of the albums that you were involved in would want to be the one you'd want to have the most with you?
Well, if I was in a zombie apocalypse, I wouldn't be playing music because that would attract zombies. And I'd have to use my katana sword. But if I was on a desert island and it was one of my albums that I had to choose from, I would choose Tiny Music.
And is that the one that you're most proud of?
I think that's STP's most creative album.
Great. Okay, the most wonderful time of the year is a guilty holiday pleasure of mine. If you were ever to do a sequel of what new or traditional Christmas favorites, what would it include?
That's a tough question. What's that? I can't think of the name of the song right now. And I almost recorded it last Christmas. The John Lennon Christmas song.
I can't think of the name of it. I know what one you're talking about.
Is it It's Christmas Time?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's it.
I think that might be the name of it.
Nice. I love how you also put out an album of nothing but cover songs in a few years back. Who is the one artist, living or dead, that you'd want to collaborate with?
David Bowie.
Now, why David Bowie? Out of everybody on the planet.
He's my biggest influence musically, vocally, and fashion-wise.
I can see the fashion, for sure. Well, nothing has been officially announced. You have been quoted as saying the classic Guns N' Roses lineup will reunite next year. Do you still hope to bring back Velvet Revolver one day?
I'd be open to it.
Really? I wasn't expecting that answer. I'm quite happy about that. And I'd like to know what is the most extreme thing that's ever happened to you on the road, whether it be good, bad, indifferent, with a fan.
Let's see. In the early days, there were some R-rated things that went on, but I'd say the craziest thing was grabbing a golf cart and taking it through the trails in the woods.
And did you crash it?
No, but we did break the axle.
Nice, nice. Okay, and what is your most favorite thing, food-wise, to eat on the road? Your favorite place to stop?
Stopping somewhere for a good steak. That and sushi.
Nice.
All right, and we're back. So, Don, that was, considering the situation and the circumstances and the short notice, I think that was a very well done interview, and he actually answered quite generously, I would say. What was your feeling of being there? That was your first interview.
That was my very first interview, and unfortunately, I was flying by the seat of my pants. I did not have a chance to read the questions over properly before I did the interview. I had about 10 minutes to set up my camera, set up the tripod, quickly read over the questions, and it was go time. He walked in the door. When he walked in, he seemed a bit uncomfortable.
Yeah, you said he was expecting just audio or something.
He
right?
was expecting just audio, and he mentioned that he didn't realize that it was going to be on camera. And I apologized to him, and I actually told him that we didn't have to do this if he didn't want. I would never want to make somebody feel uncomfortable in a situation. But he graciously accepted, and he made a comment that if he had known, he would have done his hair a little bit better.
So
I had a bit of a chuckle at that and reassured him that he looked fine, and he always looked fine from what I could tell. He was very stylish for the most part. He seemed to take great pride in how he looked.
You know what I love about that interview is that it was very straightforward, even though it seemed he seemed kind of resistant at the beginning, but like right off the bat, the very first question that you asked was, Happy Thanksgiving, American Thanksgiving.
As I stumbled over my words,
Yeah.
I hadn't had a chance to read anything ahead of time, so it was a bit go.
No, but it's fine because it was very tearful to like watch in the editing process, and I'm sure you had the same experience watching it off your camera. But like, he was thankful for his wife and 2 kids, and that just kind of made you tear up right away.
It did. It really did. Every time I think about it, I do get teary-eyed. And don't get me wrong, I did not know Scott, and I don't want anybody to think that I did. It just it being my first interview and having this outcome is very emotional.
It's also a very hard situation sometimes when, in the last 15 years with the rise of blogs like yourself and others, it's we're all kind of fans of the people that we get to cover too. There's those magazines like Rolling Stone and Spin and the like that are that they come from a journalism background. And they will cover anybody in the same manner and enthusiasm, or sometimes mostly lack of enthusiasm, because they just need to get the facts across. And that's what I love about blogs like yours and Live in Limbo is because you can tell that somebody's really enthusiastic about what they're covering, and you want that. And journalism school will probably poo-poo on all of our blogs and say, this is sentence structure is horrible and this paragraph should be here, and you should never let your enthusiasm and emotional, and you should never use adjectives that are positive because you just want to be like a newspaper writer and leave yourself out of the story. And that's really hard to be able to walk in there. I remember when I did my interview with him, I was kind of terrified. There's not a lot of people who terrify me, but he was one of them.
Like, when you say terrified, you mean like nervous or
very, because your first question, you never want to set anybody off on the wrong path. And you also, you don't want them to get up and leave.
That was my problem when he,
that
was the problem when he right away he said, I didn't know this was going to be on camera. Right then and there, I'm uncomfortable.
Right.
And I don't want to tick him off, and I don't want him to get up and leave. So now I'm uncomfortable, which is making him even more uncomfortable. And it was just, it was just an awkward situation right from the get-go.
And from your background as a photographer too, your whole job is to make people feel really comfortable with the camera and with their surroundings.
Right. And then for his very first words out of the gate was, I didn't know this was going to be on camera. Right then and there, it set the mood. So it was awkward right from the get-go.
But it turned out fine. Eric, do you remember what your first question to him was?
Yeah, it was more of a statement. I'm lucky that I get to do a little bit of an introduction.
Yeah.
And I just blow smoke up their bum. Like it's because I only talk to people who I love.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never done an interview on the Sirius radio show with somebody I don't know the music of or that I don't like. And because I'm kind of lucky that way, because that's not what I do for a living. So it doesn't earn me my paycheck to put a roof over my head. So I do it because I love to do it. So I think the first thing, so I talked about just how many records he sold, and he's still on the line. And I told him, I said, I'm going to just give you an introduction. And he said, all right. And then I gave him the introduction. And my first question was, the best thing I can say so far about listening to the Wildabouts and watching you guys so far, and I think the album came out like a couple of days afterwards, is that it seems like he was back in a gang again. And it seems like with the solo albums, no matter the success that he had with it, there's something about a lead singer and a leader in a band going solo and then going back to a band. And we saw that with Stone Temple Pilots. We saw that with Velvet Revolver. And then we saw that again with the Wildabouts. And that's why I said, you know what? The best thing I can say about this thing so far is you now being in a gang again, being in a band, having that support system. And he said, That's right. Like that's the best feeling that I've had.
You nailed it.
So you try to find that emotional connection, however small it is, just to get them relaxed a little bit. But look, I'm not looking for him to announce that he's putting Stone Temple Pilots back together again. I rarely try to goad them into giving me a scoop. Like, tell me something you haven't told anybody before. I'm not looking for that. I'm just looking for a 12-minute conversation with somebody that I come up with. I write 40 questions down specifically for that person. I'm lucky to get to one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't care, because as long as I keep the conversation flowing, like I'm just hanging out and shooting fish in a barrel with him and just talking for 12 minutes. So that's what I wanted to kind of get out of him. Was this could have been part of a 2-hour conversation, and we're all just lucky to listen to 12 minutes of it.
Absolutely.
Not we're all lucky, we're all blessed to listen to me, but it's like a Rolling Stones song, right? Like, that the party's going on forever, but here's 3.5 minutes of what the band was playing.
Even though it was in such a short amount of time, he was very humorous with the zombie question and being on a desert
I
island.
love that.
Yeah,
I love
that was
that.
really fun to see him smile and be a little silly there. Don, what was the most surprising thing that he said?
Probably that he'd be open to a reunion
with Velvet
Revolver. That I was expecting a flat out no.
Well, I'm surprised he even mentioned any of the previous bands. I thought he didn't like to talk about them.
That was my understanding as well, but because I reworded a few of the questions, I was a bit hesitant about asking it, but I thought I might as well. And I was honestly expecting a flat out no.
So, Don, I guess, and then the following day, you text me, I think at what time was it? 1 a.m.?
It was in between 12:30 and 1 a.m. I had seen on Facebook that he had passed, and I didn't want to believe it. I texted you, and I also texted Eric right away, immediately, as soon as I saw it.
What did you feel in that moment, knowing that you didn't know exactly then that you did the last interview with him, but you still were one of the last people?
I was in absolute shock, to be honest, and then I burst into tears.
Mm-hmm.
Just to think that not a couple hours earlier that I was with him and watching him perform on stage. And when I was done taking my pictures for that night, while he was on stage, I just kind of looked at him and blew him a little kiss to say thanks.
Oh, really?
And I walked out.
So I think, and then the next day he was so that was on Tuesday, December 1st at Adelaide Hall in Toronto. And then the next day he was supposed to perform in Windsor, I think. And then that got canceled. And then they reported his passing on that same night.
I think it was Thursday night, 4:00, from what my understanding is. I mean, I could be wrong, but that was my understanding.
That was definitely his last performance. And I think The Edge, they interviewed him earlier in the day, noon. And yours was right backstage, literally.
Mine was backstage at the interview time was for 8 p.m. and it was shortly thereafter. I'm going to say about 8:05. He was all suited up. Yeah, he was all suited up, ready to go, apparently with some bad hair, according to him. But it was in the green room. And just as I was packing up, the drummer came in and was asked if we were done. And I said yes. And he started warming up for the performance.
And now today is Saturday, December 5. Rolling Stone actually featured your interview, and it was pretty amazing, surreal. It's surreal.
It is surreal. I found that out, I'm going to say within an hour of waking up this morning.
Eric, you sent me that text. Email, yes.
I was kind of keenly excited. The fact that somebody like a big publication like that acknowledges your site and acknowledges the fact that that there is something to be said for the last interview. Because sometimes the media looks for things like that. They look for snippets of that. They now the questions in the media will be, well, what if Velvet Revolver got back together again? And that was all because Don asked the question.
Yeah, what if? That's a haunting question. And so, Don, I think you also you sent me a link from the CBC or one of CBC, and police found small amounts of cocaine on the tour bus, and they arrested the bassist, Thomas Dalton Black. What are your thoughts on that?
It makes me sad, to be honest.
And how
makes me really sad. I would hope that people would watch out for each other.
How about you, Eric? Is this like super shocking?
I don't think, you know what, it's so hard to think of anything as shocking anymore. But unfortunately, I don't want to comment on it because it's still a police investigation. Yeah. But you know, it's a hard. You know what? I'll just echo Don. It's sad. However, he passed away. Whether the coke was his, whether it was somebody else's, whether there wasn't even coke, whether it might have been baby powder. The fact that somebody that we've all long admired isn't here anymore is an incredibly sad situation.
I think the best way to pay tribute to Scott is to talk about our favorite music and videos from him. I'll start off first. The first time I fell in love with his music. I'm 27. I love Sour Girl and the video for that and those freaky Teletubby bunnies running around. That's iconic. And I think he even said that period was the most creative he's ever felt. So how about you, Don? What's your favorite song and video from him?
Honestly, you know what? I think I have to agree with you.
Sour Girl.
Yeah, classic. I really think I have to agree with you on that one.
How about you, Eric? You must be able to dig a little deeper.
Flies in the Vaseline we are. Sometimes it blows my mind.
Why is that?
All the time.
Why? What in particular?
You know what? Just as a debut single, to make a statement that we are all screwed and that we are all stuck and that it led to other songs that was released and later on performed by the band about just how deep of a hell that you could be and that it was okay to talk about those thoughts and feelings. And then the video wise, I don't know. I missed this song the first time around. I kind of dug it, but not as much as now. Slither by Velvet Revolver must be one of my favorite Saturday night songs. I play it on repeat when I'm going out. There's the video that is probably shot for $10,000 in the basement of a seedy club, and it has everything rock and roll in it. It's got, the booze and the women and the scantily clad, clothing that they're wearing. But what an absolute rock and roll video that is, and it's now one of my favorite songs, and it's so rock and roll, and especially because he came out and said that Velvet Revolver was done purely for economic reasons rather than through music reasons, that he didn't feel as close to the music as he did with Stone Temple Pilots. But man, that's an amazing rock and roll song right there.
Don, you got to witness his final performance. You were there taking photos.
I was.
And we have like our review and photos in the link in the description below. But what was it like seeing him, that you didn't know that was going to be his last performance, but just right there on the spot? How did you feel like his presence was? Like how was he doing?
There was one thing I did notice, that he did not smile once on stage.
Really?
Not once. Once again, he almost felt it looked like he felt a bit uncomfortable, and I'm not quite sure why. I mean, I could speculate until the cows come home, but he did not smile once during the whole entire performance.
Did he dance?
He danced a little bit.
Yeah.
The venue is fairly small. The stage was very cramped, full of gear. There wasn't a lot of room up there. I was honestly quite surprised that he was performing there because of how small it was. But it really bothered me that not once did he smile.
Wow. There's a really great clip and I don't know what song it is, but he is performing. I think it's with Stone Temple Pilots. I'm pretty sure. I'm absolutely sure it's with STP. And he walks up to the microphone so straight and cold and then he kind of gets into the music and slithers and does his
he slithered. Yeah.
It's quasi Mick Jagger vibe. And then by the end of the song, you can tell that the entire band is feeding off of his moving around and owning that stage and doing that little James Brown shuffle that he did.
Yeah.
And that's really, really cool to see when somebody is so into his own music that he just can't stop from dancing.
That is the highlight, I guess, that's his persona, that's his charisma.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be able to transform that into energy that the audience feeds off of as well. And sometimes it's really hard to do that in a cold television studio. It's certainly a lot easier to do that in on the stage. But I think Don's assessment is pretty accurate with what this tour has been. He's been very he's been beat up a lot from the media about his lack of warmth.
He did mention
that's what he's going through.
One of the first things he said when he came on stage was he said he wanted everybody to put their phones down. This was a live performance. Put down your phones, and everybody cheered like crazy, and then instantly put their phones back up.
That's typical today.
Yeah.
We'll follow you, but only for 30 seconds.
It wasn't. I don't even think it lasted 30 seconds. I think it was 10.
So, Don, what do you want to say last about Scott Weiland on this episode?
I just want to tell his family and his friends I'm thinking about them.
How about you, Eric? Any last thoughts?
We've lost one of the legendary frontmen for the rock and roll band of our generation. There's absolutely no doubt about that. But as always, the music will live on. We have the music, we have the videos, and he'll always be in our hearts when we talk about great musical acts and sending good thoughts to his family and friends and children to get through this, because they will.
Absolutely. He has left an imprint on the music that we listen to today. And again, our thoughts go out to his family, friends, crew, and fans. And that is our episode on the great late Scott Weiland. Don, where can all of our listeners find you on social media?
You can check me out on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Minnie's Memories.
Cool. How about you, Eric? You're everywhere. Where can all of our listeners find you?
I'm not on social media at all.
You're not. Nobody can find Eric anywhere.
No. They can follow me on Twitter at that Eric Alper, or they can visit the website anytime at thatericalper.com.
Amazing. And you can find myself on Twitter at Sean Chin. Please follow the show at Live in Limbo and use the hashtag Capsule Podcast to join in on the conversation. Please subscribe to the show in iTunes, give us 5 stars, and leave us some nice words in the review section. And as always, you can find the show notes at liveinlimbo.com/capsule. Take care.